One topic in ODR and Indian history from about the middle of the 18th century until the present. Significant events, personalities, issues. 1. Although Germany had varied disadvantages, it became the most industrialized state by the end of 19th century. Examine 250 words. Reference. Directed word. Examine. Here we have to probe deeper into the topic, get into details, and find out the causes or implications, if any. Key demand of the question. The question wants us to delve deeper into the Germany of the 19th century, describe the challenges it faced, and bring out the reasons as to how it was able to overcome those challenges and become the most industrialized state by the end of 19th century. Structure of the answer. Introduction. Write a few introductory lines about the 19th century Germany. B.G. Germany had the natural resources required to start an industrial revolution. Large coal reserves located in the areas of Saar, Ruhr, Upper Silesia, and Saxony. Iron deposited sited in the areas of Erzgebirge, Harz Mountains, and Upper Silesia. Body. Discuss the disadvantages suffered by Germany at that time, which hampered industrialization. B.G. Germany had challenges after the Napoleonic War ended in 1815. Only the major ports of Bremen and Hamburg had clear and secure access to the North Sea. But even so, it did not have any clear access to the vibrant trade routes in the Atlantic. Many medievalist economic institutions remained in place, hampering the growth of agriculture and industries. Feudalism returned and continued. Moreover, guilt controlled much of the industries, and because with their licentiate policies, the establishing of factories became difficult and limited. Germany before 1871 was made of numerous German states, with Prussia being biggest, and so trade was difficult and circulation of raw materials to factories was also hard, etc. Discuss how, despite those disadvantages, Germany became the leading industrial power by the end of 19th century. B.G. Among the German states, Prussia emerged as the most economically powerful country in 1815. Prussia controlled major manufacturing towns, coalfields, and trade routes. The Prussian government showed great enthusiasm towards economic progress, which became vital to its status as a great power. In 1818, Prussia moved immediately to counter the problems arising from the post-Napoleonic era. But to solve the Rhine grew from the Prussian tariff of 1818 to a full-fledged customs union that became a catalyst for German unification. The tariff of 1818 became the basis of Prussia and signed commercial treaties with neighboring German states in order to form a customs union, etc. Conclusion. Based on your discussion, form a fair and a balanced conclusion on the given issue. Topic. Social empowerment. Role of women and women's organization. To Maternity Benefit Act has increased the entry barrier for women in labor force. Discuss 250 words. Live event. Why this question? This article highlights that one of the criticism of the Maternity Benefits Act when it was introduced was that it would increase entry barrier for females. The same has happened, and we need to think of ways through which the Act can be amended to ensure that its purposes are met. Key demand of the question. The question expects us to first explain how amendments to Maternity Benefits Act have increased entry barrier for women. Post that, we need to discuss changes through which the Act can be made more beneficial for women and discuss the way forward. Directive word. Discuss. This is an all-encompassing directive. You have to debate on paper by going through the details of the issues concerned by examining each one of them. You have to give reasons for both for and against arguments. Structure of the answer. Introduction. Explain that there is a need to enhance female participation in LFPR, and for the same purpose India brought in well-intentioned amendments to Maternity Benefits Act. Body. Explain the benefits accorded to women under the Act and highlight how it has increased entry barriers for women under the Act. India offers one of the world's most generous maternity leave policies. But India is also probably the only country where the entire financial burden of the maternity leave is supposed to be borne by the employer. In most countries, the cost of maternity leave is shared across the government, employer, insurance and other social security programs. Singapore 8 weeks employer and 8 weeks public funds. Australia and Canada 100 public funds. France social insurance scheme. Brazil mixed contribution from the employer, employee and government. Discuss the changes required in the Act and the impact it would have. Cost sharing between employer and government by way of reimbursement once the employer furnishes the proof of payment of maternity leave wage. Slab-based tax rebates offered by the government on actual maternity wages paid. Setting up a government insurance scheme to pay for maternity wages. And leave sharing in the form of 13 months maternity and 13 months paternity to negate any possibility of gender bias. Conclusion. Highlight that there is a need to enhance female participation in LFPR, for which changes in the Act have to be brought in, and discuss the way forward. Topic. Social empowerment. 3. Our understanding of disability must expand to include people with invisible disabilities. Examine. 250 words. Indian Express. Why this question? The article highlights that our understanding of disability remains limited to visual markers of disability, and in the process we end up ignoring the needs and aspirations of a sizable section. Hence there is a need to broaden our understanding. Key demand of the question. The question expects us to explain what invisible disability is, explain the current provisions for taking care of persons with special needs and how it fails those with invisible disabilities. Next, we need to discuss changes which needs to be brought in and discuss the way forward. Directive word. Examine. When you are asked to examine, you have to probe deeper into the topic, get into details, and find out the causes or implications, if any. Structure of the answer. Introduction. Explain what is meant by invisible disabilities. Body. Highlight the protections in place for securing the rights of persons with disability. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability tells us that persons with disabilities include those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full participation in society on an equal basis with others. The Rights of Persons with Disability Act of India, 2016, also clarifies that disability includes people with mental illness, epilepsy, intellectual impairment, and other disabilities which are not evident to a casual observer. Highlight the problem in the current regime. Many people with disabilities cannot be identified by a casual observer as they don't have the identity badges of a wheelchair, or a crutch, or a hearing aid, and thus their needs are often ignored. Discuss ways in which the situation can be improved. Inclusion and empowerment of people with visible and invisible disabilities must include policy action by the Ministry of Social Empowerment and Justice. The criteria and process for identifying people and certifying people with disability must find processes to recognize the disability of people with fluctuating disability, such as that experienced by many with severe mental illness. It must also include active responses to include people with invisible disabilities from agencies working in inclusive sports, inclusive sanitation, and inclusive community-based development are the catch cries of organizations working in disability. Conclusion. Give your opinion and discuss the way forward. Topic. Part of Static series under the heading World History. For new imperialism was a nationalistic, not an economic phenomenon. Critically examined. 250 words. Key demand of the question. The question expects us to explain what new imperialism is and post that. Examine the factors that led to its rise and continuation. We have to debate whether there were only nationalistic imperatives or whether economic imperatives led to its rise. Finally, we need to provide our fair and balanced opinion. Directive word. Critically examine. When you are asked to examine, you have to probe deeper into the topic, get into details, and find out the causes or implications, if any. When critically is suffixed or prefixed to a directive, all you need to do is look at the good and bad of something and give a fair judgment. Structure of the answer. Introduction. Explain that new imperialism was a period of colonial expansion and its accompanying ideology by European powers, USA, Japan, etc. during the late 19th and early 20th century. Body. First, explain why new imperialism can be considered as a nationalistic phenomenon. The later part of the 19th century was a period of intense nationalism. Nationalism came to be also created with chauvinism. Many nations developed myths of their superiority over other people. Each one felt that it too must have colonies to add to its prestige and power. Imperialism became the fashion of the age. Writers and speakers in England, France, and Germany opened institutions to promote the idea of imperialism, and took great pride in calling their territories empires. Imperialist countries took over some places in Asia and Africa because of their military or strategic importance. The imperialist nations established naval bases and coaling stations to strengthen her overseas empire. Rival nations got similar base elsewhere. Acquiring the colony also had a chain reaction. If a country needed a colony, it needed another to protect it, and so on. Overseas possessions were also useful because they added to an imperialist country's manpower. Some of the people of the colonized countries were taken into the enemy for use in wars and conquests. Discuss the economic imperatives of New Imperialism. New Imperialism was as economic as it was nationalistic. The imperial countries acquired colonies because the colonies served their economic reference. The Industrial Revolution resulted in a very great increase in the production of goods. It also created the capitate system of production. The production of goods was far in excess of the demand at home. So capitalist countries had to find new markets and buyers for the goods their industries were producing. The possibilities of one industrialized country were also limited. European countries could find markets for their surplus goods in Asia and Africa. In addition to the markets, the imperial powers needed new sources of raw materials to feed overgrowing number of industries. For attaining this objective, the imperial powers established their colonial stronghold over parts of Asia and Africa and patrolled the areas among themselves. Conclusion: give a fair and balanced conclusion on following lines. New imperialism thus was fed on as much as nationalism as on economic forces. It was not either nationalism or economic considerations alone but the two acting in tandem that drove new imperialism.